Hey everyone, I'm Todd Wayne along with Ronnie Heelan. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranormal Podcast, home for all things paranormal supernatural. Coming up on this episode of Paranomaly, we're talking with Allen Cornelison, who is a paranormal investigator with Dark River Paranormal and author of the book In Too Deep. So grab yourself a drink and a snack, turn the lights off on the way back, find yourself a nice comfy spot, and enjoy this episode of Paranomaly. Stay with us, folks. Gonna be a good one. All right, Alan, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I hear you, everybody. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. So thank you for being on our show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am from the great state of Iowa, kind of a boring metropolitan state for paranormal activity, but that's where I home myself at, and I work for Ace Hardware. Not a very exciting guy, and I also write a little bit paranormal, nonfiction paranormal.
So you do have a group, right? It's
no, I do not. I used to.
Oh, okay.
At one point, I had a name called Wanaji Paranormal. It's been several years ago. It was a Native American word that meant spirit or ghost.
Okay,
and I shed that name shortly after I returned back to my hometown of Ankeny and started over. And I just wanted to get rid of all that loose baggage, so to speak, that had anything related to that place that I was investigating. And I came up with the name Dark River Paranormal. It basically because that's what it was. It was a very dark river that I was traveling in those 7 years of what I refer to as hell. And so I investigated by myself. I had a few people that kind of gave me a nickname of Lobo, being the lone investigator and doing my own thing.
Awesome. So, Alan, what got you into the paranormal?
What got me into the paranormal? Well, it's kind of in the book. I don't know if you had a chance to read it or not, which is fine. I lost my mother's or my daughter's mother many years ago, back in the 80s, early 80s. And it was just me and my daughter. And there was one evening that I put my daughter to bed. It was within months after we had lost her. And I was watching WWF wrestling on a TV set, an old black and white TV set. And I could hear her playing in her room. I put her to bed, my daughter to bed, and I just kind of let it go. You know, I wasn't going to be that hard ass father that, hey, get to sleep. You got to get up in the morning. I just kind of let it go. Being that, trying to be a good father.
Sure.
Single parent.
Yeah.
And I got up from my chair finally, and I walked down this little narrow hallway of this mobile home that we lived in, and fully expecting to see her playing with a My Little Pony on her bed. And there she was. And she was sitting on the side of her bed, her legs dangling off the edge. And I peeked in at her and I said, hey, it's time to go to sleep, sweetheart. Lay down, go to sleep. And I turned and I walked away, and I just kind of stopped, and I turned again and I walked back into the room. I said, just ask the question, who are you talking to? And with the most matter-of-fact voice and the little chubby pointy fingers, she just kind of pointed towards the closet and in the most matter-of-fact way said, Mommy. And wow. I just,
chills.
It freaked me out. I'm a farm boy. I'm very matter of fact in everything that goes on. Either there or it isn't.
Sure.
And of course, certainly, I wanted to see what she was seeing, and there was nothing there. I couldn't see anything, and had a lump in my throat. I was angry. I had a whole wash of emotions that were raging through my mind. And the next thing you know, I'm finding myself down to the nearest library and trying to figure out what this thing called the paranormal was all about, and why children could see it and I couldn't. Why she was able to see something that I wanted so desperately to see, and maybe say "I love you" to one more time.
Aww.
And so that's how it got started. In a nutshell version.
Nice. So you had this experience, and that put you on that path, correct?
It did, but it was a selfish path at the time. As I said, I was beginning to start kind of study and try to figure out what this was all about. And back in those days, there really wasn't a lot out there as far as, paranormal groups and literature on the paranormal. There was a few magazine articles on the Warrens.
Right.
And, and I read as much as I could, about that. And of course, along that little trail, that little journey, you get people that, are interested a little bit in what you're doing. And next thing you know, they're saying, hey, I know somebody that thinks they have a ghost in your house or their house. And you've been kind of, studying this stuff and you want to go check it out. And I thought, well, yeah, maybe this is a good way for me to connect to, what I wanted to see so desperately.
Right.
Yeah. And so one thing led to another. And I was working in construction. I've known construction and, building most of my life. And I used those abilities to understand and debunk paranormal phenomenon, I guess. And I discovered that I was helping people. And all of a sudden, my own personal needs and wants turned into something different. It turned into watching somebody have this relief wash across their face, knowing that it wasn't something paranormal that was going on. But often, there was things that did happen that I just didn't have an explanation for.
Sure.
And I found a little bit of fulfillment out of that one little short statement from my daughter, and that was mommy. And it turned into something much larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That's
interesting.
an amazing story.
Yeah, definitely. So now you taking that information, you continued on to help people, correctly? And then you decide to write a book.
Well, no, I didn't actually decide to write the book.
Okay.
I investigated. I started doing this in 1982.
Okay.
So to date, it would be 4 decades. And in approximately 2012, I moved to a small town, me and my wife, a little town called Ida Grove, Iowa. And her mother lived there. Her mother wasn't doing well. The doctors had told us that, they didn't think that she was going to live much longer than a few months. She was in pretty bad shape. And so we essentially sold everything, my wife and I, and we moved up to her house. The idea was that once she passed, the idea was with her mother that we would just sell whatever she had, and then we would move back to Ankeny and carry out our lives. Well, that 7 weeks or whatever we thought it was going to be turned into 7 years.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, I had discovered through, he's passed on now, my wife's nephew, Andy, this little place in the woods called the Stagecoach Inn in Moorhead Park. And I seen this place on a little tour that Andy, that's what his name was, took me. I was a deer hunter. I loved hunting deer, and he took me to this park. And as the story goes in the book, I spotted this building, this remarkable looking building, and I asked Andy. I said, "What's this all about?" And he said, "Oh, that's the old Stagecoach Inn." He says, "It's been here for a long time. It was built in 1857, and of course." My spidey senses, I guess you could say, being a paranormal investigator, because I'd done these little, what I call one night stands for many, many years, investigating this house or that house and finding, essentially really nothing outside of an essential squirrel or a raccoon in the basement.
Right.
But I thought, wow, what if, is this is probably the oldest place I've ever even been related this close to in my entire life. And so I went to the Historical Society and I asked about a tour, just to tour it, just to see the inside of it. And a gentleman by the name of Steve Wilkins, who is the president of this society, he granted me that wish, and he gave me the nickel tour of the end and fascinating things. He told me about the Native American burial tree that was on the property that the Sioux had buried their dead. And then he told me about the shoe that was found in the walls upon restoration of the end, and thinking it was fascinating. And of course, I related shoes to being the walls to keep evil presence out of locations, and I related that to the Native American tree and building a structure on sacred Native ground. And of course, my mind is just racing. I'm thinking, with this kind of negativity, with the Native American aspect of things, there might be something actually going on here.
Right, yeah.
And so I again went to the Historical Society and I asked them, I said, is there any way I could investigate this? I didn't come off as a paranormal investigator, rather a paranormal researcher. I researched the paranormal. And the Historical Society said, that'd be fine. That'd be pretty cool if the Moorheads, who built the inn was actually there. Having that presence around would be kind of, a really cool addition to the tours of this remarkable, historic location. So anyway, to make a long story short, they granted me the permission to investigate that place, as I refer to it now. And it was on the third night that my life was turned around. Something tugged on the back of my coat very harshly and abruptly. I caught it on video, in fact.
Wow.
And I also caught the voice thereafter when I asked if someone was in the room with me, and this very small, childlike voice says, yes, it was me. And it was from that point I was hooked. And for the next 7 years, I began going down a very dark, deep hole and losing sight of myself, my spirituality, everything to do with God. It turned out to be a horrible thing. And once I left there, once I finally was able to escape the inn after 7 years, a gentleman by the name of, you might know him, Daniel Class, who owns the Hinsdale House.
Yes.
He says, Alan, you need to write a book about all these stories and all these videos you captured. And I said, I have no idea how to write a book. He said, I know a guy. I know a guy. And I'll hook you up. And so he did. He hooked me up, and I wrote the first book, and it was called Ghosts and Legends of the Stagecoach Inn. And it was somewhat successful. But then here in the past couple of years, and I could get further into it, I discovered he was doing some things that were rubbing me the wrong way. And I also found out that he was the minister of the Church of Satan, my publisher.
Wow.
Yeah. So not only, I tell people now, not only did I investigate hell, but my publisher was a disciple of Satan.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I ended up breaking our contract and then rewriting the book much better than it was originally done, and I called it In Too Deep. And the reason I called it that was because I was well in over my head. At that point of my life when I was investigating the inn, I had 30 years of experience in the paranormal, and I thought I knew everything, and there was nothing that could surprise me anymore. And I discovered that I had jumped into the deep end of the pool, that peripheral pool, and I had no life preservers. I had no life saving abilities. I was sucked into a very dark place.
Yeah.
So did you live by this place?
Yeah, I was only probably from where my house was situated there in Ida Grove. It was less than a 3.5 minute drive.
Oh, wow.
So I worked in town there. I worked at a little tire shop, a little mom and pop tire shop there in town. It no longer exists anymore. The old guy, he finally gave up the business after doing it for 50 some odd years. And I would seriously, I would get up in the morning, I would go to work, and I'd fix tires and do oil changes just for something. I had to have a job. So that's what I did. And my lunch breaks, I'd go out to the inn. It was only like 3 minutes from there. And I would sit on the front porch. I'd eat my lunch. I go back. I'd do more tires, do more oil changes. And then at the end of the day, I go back to the inn and I would investigate it. And it was just, the wheels in the bus goes around and around, man. It was just over and over and over again. And I did this for years. And then I decided, well, I'm going to create a team. And that turned, and that's a whole nother story. Everything went sideways with people, friends, family. I just about punched out a minister.
Wow.
It wasn't me anymore. The person that was involved with the end, it was no longer me anymore. I lost track of being who I was. Social media began swallowing me up.
Yep.
Everything was about the getting all the really cool videos out there and the notoriety. And when I did that, and of course, now looking back on it, hindsight's 2020, when one decides that their brand, so to speak, and who they are, is the goal of becoming a paranormal investigator, you have failed at what you're doing. And I am now back to doing what I do, just helping people. I don't look for notoriety. In fact, when I rewrote the book, I more or less felt like a hypocrite, because I'd always said in the beginning that what I was doing wasn't about being on TV or writing books. It was about helping people. But as I look at this book, and if people would actually read this book in the manner that I had written it, they would see it as a learning tool. And that learning tool is, I don't want to be that guy, because there were so many red flags that if you read the book that were presented to me along that journey, I should have just said, enough's enough and stopped. But I didn't. I continued. And I was my own path of self-destruction along those 7 years.
Yeah, it's like you got obsessed.
Right. So did the end just kind of like keep pulling you in there? Was it
every day.
Was it like some kind of force or something,
It is, we once found the voice of a small child that we caught on recording there. And it's in that small child, which sounds like maybe 12 years old. And it declared simply, "Someone save us."
Wow.
Wow, that's creepy.
I've often wondered, being caught, building a structure on such sacred ground is, and again, this is all in theory, conjecture, whatever you want to call it, that if you've invaded that place in your life, then you're going to probably be captured there in your death. And I've often wondered that. And now to this day, I think, oh my God, is my destiny to be, trapped within the walls of the Stagecoach Inn? I believe it's already taken a part of me away.
Yeah.
People ask me, you can ever investigate there? And I go, you know what? I investigate there probably 3 seconds of every day, about twice a month.
Wow.
It's in my head, and it'll never leave. And it constantly whispers to me. There's just a constant whisper all the time. And I've told people that the Stagecoach Inn is kind of like being in a really bad relationship. If you go back, it's going to be the same train wreck as it was before.
Yeah.
And you do it anyway because you think to yourself, it really wasn't that bad. We had some rough spots, but it wasn't that bad.
Right.
And then it ends up being worse.
Yeah.
So, and that's the way it was on a daily basis. I would investigate that place, and for the next 5 days after investigating, I would check my heart rate, my pulse. Self-diagnosing. I was getting sick. Me and my wife were fighting. There was financial problems. And there shouldn't have been. There should have been financial problems, and we were living house, and she was taking care of all, basically, there's no utility bills. There was nothing, to take care of other than take care of her. but yet we were finding ourselves in the hole all the time.
Right.
And it was due to that place. I was invading a place that I should not have invaded. When something pulled on my coat that night, when I had that initial contact 7 years earlier, I should have said, you know what? There is something here. There's something about this place. I've proved it, if not to myself, which was okay. Mm-hmm. I should have moved on.
Yeah, that was like your first red flag right there.
Yeah, it should have been, and that's what this book is about. In Too Deep, it's literally,
it sounds like a film. You can make a movie out of this. I'm
Everybody's told me, you know what? You're not the first person that's told me that. I constantly get people that has read the book. They said, somebody needs to make a movie out of this thing, or a miniseries or something.
Yes.
It's a story, and it's very visually done. There was a gentleman he passed away here in the past year. His name was Coyote Chris Sutton. He was on the Dead Files. He was on Ghost Adventures.
Yeah.
He was a shaman. And I grew to know Chris very well. We had talked a lot. And Chris was very concerned with this journey that I was on. And he told me, he says, Alan, he says, when you came to me and asked me if I could write a little bit about the book and about you, he says, I was hesitant. He says, I've had a lot of people that have come to me, friends of mine, that say, hey, Chris, you want to write a foreword for my book or just write a review of my book before it actually hits the newsstand. And he'd always reject them, because he says, they wrote stuff like, for instance, I walked into a scary house and something jumped out of the corner and it scared me.
Right.
Well, when I wrote this book, I wrote it in a manner that you feel like you're right there with me. And he picked up on that right away. And he says, Alan, he says, you wore your heart on your sleeve. He said, that's what drew me to writing the review. And his review was like 2 pages long.
Wow. And
he was so surprised that I did. When I talk about, almost beating the hell out of the minister because he asked me if I found God, after looking for, spirits, and I wanted just to rip his lungs out. And my wife came to me and she said, what in the hell is wrong with you? And I turned around and I literally had tears in my eyes and said, I don't know. I don't know.
So you definitely had some kind of an attachment, it seems like. Yeah. Something that just kept holding on.
It was very possible, but the question was it attached to me or was I attached to it?
Yes.
And that's the standing question.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'm in amazement over here. Like, I'm speechless.
Yeah. Yeah, that's...
Wow.
A lot of people, they don't know who I am. They've never heard of the book. And that's fine. Again, I'm not in this to be famous. I'm in this to awaken other investigators.
Yes.
In fact, if I'm trying to build an audience, not so much to purchase the book, but for me to let them know that, being a paranormal investigator isn't all about K2 meters and the neatest and coolest new device that you can buy on a paranormal website that sells tools. This is a very dangerous field. And they said, well, I get that, and I have great respect for what's going on. And I think to myself, no, you don't. You don't understand it. I've often said that if I could take all those 7 years of emotions and toils and tribulations, or however you want to describe them, and put them in a can and seal it up and then sell it. And then once you think you've discovered how the paranormal works and how terrifying it can be, you open this can up. And you get, for an instant, you actually feel and see the horror of what it can be like.
Sure.
And that's what I'm trying to push. I don't want to deflect anybody from being a paranormal investigator. I just want them to know that as soon as you say, is there anybody out there, you're in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've heard of the book. I haven't read it, but now I'm going to want to rush out and get it. Can you tell the people how? Where can we get it? Can we order it off of Amazon? Or?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Okay,
you can go to Amazon and look up In Too Deep. or you can actually go to my website. It's a new website. My publisher set it up for me. It's darkriverbooks.com, and it's a whole website. It's about In Too Deep, and it'll have a link that'll take you to the Amazon site where you can purchase it's paperback, hardback, or you can get it on Kindle.
Oh, awesome.
I do. If you want to link straight to me, you can either just go to the Dark River Paranormal page or the Allen Cornelison page on Facebook and message me, and I got one of those, what they call it, a square, and I just take your information and I can send you a signed copy, because obviously you can't get a signed copy on Amazon.
Yeah.
And at this time, believe it or not, I'm writing the sequel to the book. I didn't think I would, but I am, and it's called In Conflict. And it's at the editor's right now, and it's about 78,000 words into this book.
Wow.
That I've written, and it's basically the journey going back for the very last time to investigate this, what I refer to as a kaleidoscope to hell.
Now, you had mentioned that you want to give paranormal investigators, this is kind of like it's like a warning that can happen to them if they're not careful.
And it can happen to anybody. And the people that it happens to the most, I feel, and again, this is my own opinion, are the ones that do it on a daily basis, the ones that own these, what I call paranormal amusement parks, without, stating the names and plugging any names on your show of, paranormal hotspots around the country where you can go and investigate overnight. Those people that bring in the money and say, yeah, you can come in and investigate, and those are the ones that I worry about the most. They're so deeply invested in these haunted locations that I think they're the most at risk in being affected by this very dark field or industry. I was doing it for a while. I was trying to help the Historical Society in Ida Grove. We were trying to. I thought, hey, I'm going to raise money and get a new roof put on this place and get. But of course, they were a nonprofit organization, so it had to be donations. I brought 5 people or 5 groups. Finally, came and investigated it. One, because of course, we wanted to do some paint and stuff like that for the place.
Sure.
And secondly, it was to validate what I'd found. Anybody can say a place is haunted. But I wanted more than anybody to have, outside groups come in and validate my own findings. And I would find these groups. I found 5 groups that came in, and they would walk out of that place just shaking their heads. I had one that came back, and they see me, after like 2 years, and they go, man, they said, you're not the same. You've changed. And I go, I'm the same person I was before. They go, no, you've changed. It just outwardly, you've changed. You're a different man. You're a different person than you used to be. And so this field, not only just being an investigator, but being so close to a location can be extremely dangerous. And that's when you've really got to, and without getting, thumping on Bibles or anything like that, but you've got to start keeping a real close connection with the guy upstairs that created everything, and try to keep him there with you. Because if you think about it, when you're investigating, say you investigate 5 or 6 times a week, different locations, how many times are you talking into the dark to nothing that could potentially be evil? And how many times during the week are you actually going to church and talking to something?
Well, yeah, but wouldn't it be fair to say, though, and I'm not knocking any religious thing here,
no,
but wouldn't it be fair to say, whenever somebody prays to God, you don't know if you're actually praying to God. You want to think that you are. Because you open up a line of communication.
It's faith.
Sure,
it's faith. By all accounts, it's faith. And by all accounts, when you turn on a K2 meter and you are talking to somebody, in a sense, it's faith that the numbers are going to rise or blink on that K2 meter or that millimeter without even thinking about it. You're hopeful.
Right. It's almost like willing it.
You're going to reach somebody or something.
It's almost like willing it. Like you want it bad enough that you're willing it.
Exactly. It's all in the intent.
Right.
Yes.
You go for the intent and you might actually get what you don't want.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's more sense to me now. So I probably wasn't listening to it correctly or
No, you're fine. It's just what I'm stating is, I guess what I was trying to explain was that we're probably in a week's period of time speaking to something other than God on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so, what does that do to our spiritual self? Satan, everybody knows, if you read any, and I'm not by any means am I a minister or I study the Bible, but from what I understand is the biggest liar that has ever existed in the entire cosmos. He's a liar. And, you get somebody that believes, let's just put a name on it. We'll call her Aunt B, from Mayberry, is baking cookies now. She passed away, but now I'm smelling cookies, and it has to be Aunt B. Well, it must be her because she had unfinished business. She's not ready to go yet. Well, what if the unfinished business isn't Aunt B? It's your own feelings of she had unfinished business. Yeah. And there are certain items, there are certain entities out there, whether they're human or never been human, that could actually slide into Aunt B's shoes and say, okay, you want Aunt B? Here she is.
That is true. Yes.
And then all the while, what's happening? You're beginning to pull away from the light and go towards the darkness.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So because how you're describing it, it's almost like you definitely was obsessed with this place.
I was very much so obsessed.
Now, did this ruin your relationship with your wife?
It damn near ruined our relationship. Yes.
Wow.
We're very strong now. I mean, we're very strong together. My wife Pam supports me completely in what I do, but at the time, it nearly ruined us.
What about with your daughter?
I haven't talked to her in years. She went on her own way. I asked her many years ago, I asked her if she remembered that night, and she does not.
Oh, okay.
She does not remember that night. She was like 3 when that happened. And we have since, our relationship, kind of went on the wayside, which, these things happen.
Yeah.
But without getting into too much detail, it just found our different roads. And that's just how things play out. And that could be because of what I do. I don't know. Yeah. I really don't know.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah.
Now as far as, because you said that you have another book that you're in the process of.
Yeah, it's called In Conflict.
So this book here is a continuum for where you left off, correct?
Yeah, and I really didn't plan on writing it. There was a little bit left that when I wrote the first book, there was one last investigation that I didn't get into the book because I didn't exactly know how to explain it. My first editor, my first publisher, he was just badgering me to get this book out before it was like November or something on his next cycle of books. And I just lightly touched on the very last time that I investigated the Stagecoach Inn. And I just felt unfinished. And I began to talk with him about adding on to the book. And he said, yeah, we could make a revised version of the book. And unfortunately, I started finding out all these things about my last publisher, and I dumped him completely. And I thought, how am I going to write this one last investigation, 8 hours? How am I going to make a book into it? And I actually sat down and I started thinking about it. And I started thinking about how much it took for me to go back there. everything that I went through and to begin with. And then now here I am being basically talked into going back, in the struggles that I was having in my own spiritual self to go back to the Stagecoach Inn and reinvestigate it, and then finally do that last investigation. And believe it or not, it turned into a novel. It's larger than the first book.
Well, what is like the time gap between the last time that you was there and then the one that you went back for?
About 8 months.
Okay, all right.
When I left the Stagecoach Inn, you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Chris Moon?
Not sure.
Well, he's a psychic medium. He's I don't know. He has his own thing. He's been on a few shows as well. But he got in contact with me through a kind of a third party person. And he said, "Hey, I heard you, I'm back in Ankeny now. We'd moved back. I had put the Stagecoach Inn behind me." And he got a hold of me and he said, "I'd like to really look at this place." And I thought, well, okay, I can give you a tour. And so I drove up to Ida Grove. It was only like a 2-hour drive from where I'm currently living. And I met him there. And he did a virtual tour through there with his phone, and he was picking up a lot of bad mojo and vibes, which didn't surprise me. Psychic mediums, they always pick up bad mojo and vibes,
right?
And it was on, Native American ground, and he was saying, a very dark place and blah, blah, blah. You know how it all goes. And at the end of his little spiel, him and his friends, they get back from they had another event that was like, I don't know, an hour away from where we were at that he was going to. And he's like, "Allen," he says, "if you ever want an event here, let me know. So I'll help you set that up." And of course, I wasn't no longer living in Ida Grove. We'd moved away from there. And I said, "Yeah, whatever, and anyway, he left, and I thought, I'll never see this guy again. 3 days later, Chris Moon calls me and he says, "We're going to do an event from the Stagecoach Inn." And I thought, okay. So I get a hold of the right people, which was Steve Wilkins, who was the president of the place, and explained to him that, we're going to try to raise a little bit of money for the inn. We're going to bring some people in. They're going to sell tickets. And we had people coming as far away from Colorado for this event. And the inn wasn't really set up to do this kind of event. There's no plumbing there. The electricity is very limited. There's no water. It's in a park, so you have to go to outside kaibos, like in a park, bathrooms. So it really wasn't set up for this kind of event, but we did it anyway. And it was a 3-night event. He was charging so much money for readings during the day, and then we'd do these investigations at night. And there was a film crew that came in his name was Jim Martin. And I became fast friends with Jim Martin. In fact, he's in the second book quite a bit. But he came out, and we're going to film Chris, and we're going to do a big, kind of a documentary on the Stagecoach Inn. It turned into something bigger than I ever thought it could be. And the second night, we had people that were leaving. And these are folks that had been investigating for 10, 15 years. Chris came to me and he said, "Allen," he says, "what's the deal with the taillights?" He says, I said, "Chris, people are leaving. They're scared to death. We had people that were getting burned. It was like wow. these what would you call them? They were kind of like a native type scarring or burns, like being branded.
Wow.
On their arms and on their backs, and it wasn't scratches. These actually were symmetrical in a sense, and they kind of looked like the yin and yang symbol, but yet it was apart from itself. And people were fainting and passing out, and it was hell on earth. One group called Short Bus Paranormal, who is actually in my second book, was there, and they almost left, but they felt they had to stay just to help, because it turned into It turned into a war zone.
Right?
There
Sounds like
were
it was a
people that were
nightmare.
laying out on the grass that were just feeling as if they weren't themselves, and it was.
Wow.
I look back on it now, and it was actually kind of comical, but at the same time horrifying. And so anyway, it was all over, and it left, and then about 6 months later or so, this Jim Martin I referred to here just a second ago called me, and he says, "Hey, buddy," he says, "what do you think we do another event from there? Do, one last investigation." And that's kind of where the second book picks up.
Yeah. Is there any significance to the date when all that happened that you know of from your research or anything?
No, not necessarily. I did, however, determine that between the hours of about 7:45 at night until about 11:50 at night, or p.m., activity would be at its greatest.
Wow.
From about midnight till 2 to 3, it was slight, but the most dramatic. I mean, it'd be like nothing going on for 2 hours, and then something huge would happen, like a tree limb almost sounded like it fell in the front room. Just crashes.
Wow.
Huge, loud, just explosions that would just shake the place.
Wow.
We had, on several occasions, the Ida County Sheriff's Office would be called to the Stagecoach Inn, and usually it was at night around 11:30, 12 o'clock, stating that there were lights on out there, and they were in fear that somebody broke in and was trying to steal some of the relics that were in there. The place has been, fashioned to look a lot like the 1800s up till about 1928. In that era. And of course, there's no alarm system out there. So the sheriff would go out and they would check the padlocks to be all secure, but lights would be on the inside, and they'd walk around, nothing going on, and then they'd leave, and they'd do one more tour back past the end one more time before they left the park, and the lights would be off.
Wow.
This is coming from the sheriff's department. So it's just, there's a lot going on out there, and I don't want to have any more thing to do with it. People ask me all the time, do you want to go back? No, I do not. I'll never go back. It's a bad place for me. To this day, I have nightmares about that place. And I hired an artist to paint a drawing, and it's very vivid. It's a beautiful painting. It hangs up here in my office, and I look at it, and it's what I see in my dreams.
Wow.
And that's
crazy.
And again, I talk about it in the second book, In Conflict. And there was a lot of conflict in returning to that place. I do, however, did fit to you a little bit. I did go back there about 2 months ago. Of course, my wife's father was, World War II veteran, and for Memorial Day weekend, we went up to put flowers on his grave, and I took the book, the only copy ever of In Too Deep, the hardcover, and I have it sitting here right next to me. And I thought, I'm going to take this book out there, and I'm going to do a selfie with me, the book, and the inn, all in one place at the same time. And so I did. I took a selfie, and I put it on Instagram, and that's the last time I've ever been there. I didn't even so much as look in the windows.
Wow.
But it's still pulling you back, though. I mean, you went back there with the book, so you're like,
I did.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if it's just going to keep pulling you back.
It is. It's going to be always there. Coyote Chris Sutton said that it's with me all the time, and it'll be with me. And and the most incredible thing about that time there, if anything at all came out of it, was before. Again, like I said, I'd find raccoons in the basements, or I'd find reasonable explanations to hauntings of residents in other places. Since that time, I have more captured activity. I've actually captured on video a paranormal phenomenon. And I asked Chris about this once, and he said, Alan, he says, the reason is you catch more than you've ever done in your life is because just because you were at the Stagecoach Inn doesn't mean that everything else in this world hasn't noticed that you noticed them. And it's just going to be with you. And I have had so much, I guess, misfortune in finding paranormal phenomenon than I ever have in the 40 years I've done this. I just recently did an investigation at a place called the Haunted YMCA in Rock Island, Illinois. And I'm in the staircase of this place, and I'm doing a live stream through what another company called the Spirit Realm Network. And I'm doing this live with my Canon FX205. It's a high quality, it's a camera made for broadcasting. And we're hooked up to the internet, and I'm sitting in the staircase, and you can hear it over the shotgun microphone. There is a total conversation going on below me of at least 6 or 7 people. I have never heard anything like that. Wow. And the people who own the building say, we've never heard that before. And and I found out later that this area that I was hearing these voices from in this old building was the locker room area where the pool was.
Wow.
Which made a lot of sense. Why wouldn't there be a lot of people talking? And It was men. These were adult men, and they wouldn't allow me to be part of the conversation, but it's going on. And if you would go to, I believe it's the Spirit Realm Network website, you can see the Haunted YMCA live stream that I did there, and you can hear these people talking. And it was amazing. It was an amazing capture. But that goes on with me now all the time. So whether that has anything to do with anything remains to be seen. I tell people I'm about as sensitive as a blade of grass.
Yeah, but I think they're attracted to you.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, you definitely have something that they're coming for.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
I wouldn't say it like that.
Yeah,
I just think that they
quite like that. But no, you definitely have some kind of presence about you, and they want you to know something.
Maybe. I don't know what that something is, and whatever it is, that's something I'd rather not know. I grew up in a very small town, and I went to a country church, and I went to Sunday school, and I was told when you die, you go to one of two places: you go to heaven or hell.
Yeah.
Right.
Period. There's no in between. There is something out there other than heaven and hell. And, I believe that, why would anybody want to come back here?
Right.
If the streets of gold are there, why in the hell would anybody want to come back to this place? I've been talking to a gentleman by the name of Father Ruben Lopez. He is with the New York Catholic Diocese. He's a Roman Catholic priest who's also an exorcist. He's been an exorcist for over 50 years. And he informed me that what we probably see are what they refer to as rogue demons. Now, I don't know for sure, but I do know after what has been explained to me in the Bible that there's an impossible chasm that divides heaven from hell, and nothing can cross that chasm. If you're cast into hell, that's where you're staying at. No human can cross that chasm. Well, that discounts evil, things that were never alive. And just like our natural world that we exist in right now, say, for instance, our government, we have people that follow the rules and we have people that don't follow the rules. Well, supposedly, according to Father Lopez, that Satan runs a pretty tight ship. He has this pact with God that, anybody bad comes down there and he punishes them. That's what Satan does. But there are some of these so-called rogue demons that want a little bit more. They don't want to just punish people there in hell. They want to come across that chasm, and they're able to because they were never human or alive in the first place. And that's what is tormenting us here on this plane today. Very interesting. It's a crazy way out there thought, but how do you argue with a priest?
Right, that's right. And it's hard to tell I mean, we've never been to the other side, so how do we know? But it's a good theory.
Exactly. We're not, all this is everything that I'm telling you tonight, everything that I can hear at a seminar, if I would go to one tomorrow about how all this works, is simply all theory. And none of us are going to know anything until we're actually dead. And then we're going to probably, excuse me, not give a shit.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're at.
Me, I'll come back as a bird or something and get hit by a car. That's usually how it works for me.
We've all seen that. We've all seen that commercial where the little girl sees a butterfly and has a broken wing, and she cries to her daddy, and her daddy fixes a wing, and the butterfly floats away across the field, and all of a sudden it gets hit by a truck.
Yeah.
So
that's definitely going to be me, I'm sure. So let me ask you, when you went and investigated and gathered more from this particular inn, did you use all kinds of equipment, or did you?
I used a lot of equipment. In fact, I created a device called the Mag-D, and it sits here in my office. I stare at it every day, and the Mag-D is multiple apparition generating device. I was in the security field for a long time. I put in security systems in buildings, and a lot of times I'd put security systems in jewelry stores, and we would have what they call a proximity alarm, that if somebody would get too close to a safe or maybe some jewelry behind a glass, it would activate what they call a trouble sensor on a keypad. And it wasn't really an alarm, it was just a trouble. And that would let somebody know that somebody is intruding the space of something. Well, I took that technology and I scaled it down some, where it didn't really pick up my static charge, but it would pick up a static charge, like say from if you took two plastic bags and rubbed them together a little bit, you get that DC charge.
Yeah,
it would pick that up, and so I put it into this device, as well as a huge electromagnetic pump. If you put a millimeter within 4 foot of this thing when it's turned on, it'll smoke it. I mean, the numbers on a millimeter will just be like 7 lines.
Wow!
It just completely smokes it. So I had to put this proximity locator in there. So if the lights go out on this locator, I can shut off the pump and I can use a millimeter kind of as a double redundancy to see if the lights or the numbers begin to rise. And if the lights are still off on the proximity locator and I'm still getting high numbers on my millimeter, that's telling me that there's probably something in the environment. So I've created that specifically for the Stagecoach Inn. But my go-to piece of equipment when I was there was a vibration sensor. And it was a run-of-the-mill vibration sensor that I got off of Amazon or someplace. It was for a door. It was designed to, it had a magnet in it where you would put it on a metal door. So if somebody would shake a doorknob, or try to break into your house, it would just scream into alarm. But it wasn't so sensitive that if it was a windstorm outside and twigs and stuff would strike the door, and maybe move a little bit, that it would go off. And I thought, well, that'd be a great piece of equipment to use because it's not oversensitive at all. In fact, I would walk around it. I mean, I could literally just walk right next to this thing sitting on the floor and it wouldn't go off. It probably went off, I'm going to guess, 70, 80 times on the staircase leading upstairs in the Stagecoach Inn, where people eventually figured was some kind of a portal.
Wow.
And I captured it so many times going off, along with a motion sensor that I would usually put with it to accompany that vibration sensor. In fact, in one of my videos, I'm standing there and I'm talking to whatever is in the environment. And I said, just set that motion sensor off for me, and I go into another room and I'm poking around and all of a sudden the motion sensor starts screaming. And I come back and sure enough, the vibration sensor is going off, the motion sensor is going off, and there's no way that anybody could have seen, could have set it off. It's in a walled-in area. You can't disturb these things without actually passing by them.
Yeah.
Another video, it's on the Dark River Paranormal Facebook page, and I think I called it "Crazy Motion Activity" or something like that. Was the highlight, or the title of the video. But you can watch this video and you can see that there's nobody there. So, yeah, I used a lot of different kinds of equipment. In fact, I had one group, it was called Siouxland Paranormal, that came to investigate. And they brought a device called, let me see if I get this straight, it was called a beam sensor.
Okay.
Kind of like if you break the beam, something would go into alarm.
Oh, okay.
And they bought it primarily to investigate Edinburgh Manor. They thought if there was any place on this whole planet that this beam sensor would be activated, it would be at Edinburgh Manor. And so they took it there, and of course they didn't capture anything. And they took it to Villisca, and they took it to every place, all the most popular places you can think of here in the Midwest. And it never activated. And they set it up at the Stagecoach Inn in the judge's quarters, Judge Moorhead's little law office, his little courtroom. It was a small room, kind of in the southeast corner of the old inn. It was a place where he was a land judge, okay? And people would come to him outside his room, his window, and they would bring their case to him. And he would stand there at this window, and he would listen to their argument, and he'd say, okay, this is where your property lines are according to all my manuals and books and things, and he would settle these disputes. So they put this beam sensor across this window, and lo and behold, it went off.
Wow.
And these people were blown away. I interviewed the one gentleman, and I said, what's that called? And the whole tape, it's called the beam sensor, the video is. And he's like, you can see the wheels turning in his head. Like, how could this even be? He says, we bought this thing primarily for Edinburgh Manor. And he said, that was the one place that we would have expected this thing to go off, and it never has. It never did until tonight. He said, I don't get it. And you can just see he's trying to find the words. He's trying to find the words to why all these known locations that all these, big TV shows have been at. And here's this little place out in the middle of Podunk, Iowa, that sets this beam sensor off. And he's just blown away. They actually took a really fascinating picture from outside. And I think I posted it a couple times. It wasn't one of my photos, but it was an elemental. And this thing actually looks like a fairy floating in the sky.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
It's pitch black, and here's this white, this like bright light, and it looks exactly like Tinkerbell.
Todd has Tinkerbell on his shoulder.
Yeah, it just looks to me like, and she showed me, she says, it's on my camera, it's right here. I'd seen it for the first time on the back, a little back screen of a digital camera. So I knew that they didn't mess with it. It was, they just came inside. And she said, look at this. She said, you got things that are living outside of this wonderful place. There are things that are guarding this place. There are elementals that are here. They're everywhere.
Right.
Oh, that's crazy.
And so there's so many layers to that place, as I now refer to it, that it is yet to be touched, yet to be understood. And it's not going to be me that's going to do it, that's going to try to figure it out. I should have just, like I said, I should have just left it alone. I will backpedal a little bit and state this. If there was anybody of greatness in the paranormal, somebody that's done this for a long time, like Zappos or somebody of that nature that has, Zappos obviously is related to the Warrens, would come to me and say, you know what, Alan, I would like to go back there and like you to come along as a consultant. I probably would.
Right.
But I wouldn't investigate it. I would be there basically to say, okay, this is where, you got to be careful. This is where you got to watch your back. This is, and be there as a consultant. And things looked to me like they were getting out of hand. I just shut it down. That would be my job. I would just say, enough's enough. You don't want any part of this, just because you don't, I've heard people that say, well, I'm not allergic to poison ivy. I've walked through it, fields of it all my life. And then all of a sudden one day they walk through a field of poison ivy and they just get covered in it. So it would be up to me to know when that poison ivy was going to cling. so to speak.
Do paranormal investigators go to this place?
No, not anymore. It was kind of an equal, I guess, a shared interest between myself and the Historical Society to shut all investigations down.
Okay.
They didn't want their revered Stagecoach Inn, which is basically the cornerstone of Ida County. I mean, it was the county seat back in 1856,
right,
to be seen as a haunted location. They wanted to be seen as a place where the county was built from. It's revered, it's loved. A lot of history. It's a beautiful place. I mean, it is. It's remarkable. This place wore so many different hats. It started off as just this little humble cabin. When the Moorheads arrived here from Ohio, they found this little patch of timber in a grove of trees, a grove of oak trees, and they built this cabin. And one day a stagecoach comes rambling by and stops, and the driver gets off, and of course John Moorhead comes out of the cabin or from wherever he was at, and the driver asked him, he says, can we water our horses here? We got some people on the stage. Can they stretch their legs? And the Moorheads, they seen this as maybe a potential to some income. And so years went by, and they began to create this structure that exists today. And from 1856 until about 1880 or so, before when the railroad finally came through, it had grown, and it was still the cornerstone. It served as a post office. It was the hospital. It was the courthouse. It was a school. It was an inn, obviously, but it served so many different things all at one time. It was like the local convenience store. It was a community center. It was a church, and it did all these things at the same time. The kitchen table where Martha Moorhead would serve travelers, their meals. There's wonderful stories of the stagecoach would blow a horn. They would blow a horn. They'd be half a mile away, and they'd blow this trumpet on a stage. And Martha would hear that, and she knew the stage was coming, and so she began to prepare things, put plates out on this big long harvest table to feed the travelers. To have, so they have a place to rest and have a fine meal. But you got to understand that same kitchen area was also the hospital. And that same table was used as a surgical platform to saw limbs off when they got frostbite.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
So there's just layers and layers and layers to this place that, there's so much.
And what is it today? What is it today?
It's just a museum. It's just a working museum. You can go into town there, and I think it's on the corner of 5th and Moorhead, is the Moorhead House Museum, which is Giles Moorhead. That was Judge Moorhead's son. He turned into a doctor, and there's this big board in the front that has a phone number for the Historical Society that you can get tours, and people can still do tours in this place today. But there's so many wonderful stories that are associated with the Stagecoach Inn, but there's a lot of tragedies there as well.
Yeah.
When I found the book written by Giles Moorhead, he calls it The History of Ida County. There was a subtitle called Ghosts of the Past. Now, I referred earlier to shoes being found in the walls. At one point, the Moorheads must have put shoes in the walls of this place. And if you know anything about your paranormal history, you'll know that people used to put shoes in walls to keep evil out, because the shoe was felt to hold the sole or imprint of the wearer's foot, the owner of the house. And you would put those in weak spots. You would put them like next to a chimney or a doorway or a window opening to keep evil out. And that to me made sense because they had this burial tree that's outside. So what did Giles Moorhead know? I mean, these are the Bible-thumping Pentecostals that they just can't go around saying that my place is haunted. We see ghosts.
Right.
So when he created this book, this history of Ida County, and this little subtitle, Ghosts of the Past, was that his little release? Is that a stretch to say? Is that his little release to say we encountered ghosts when we lived there?
Interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah, his roundabout way of saying it.
Yeah.
Well,
That's interesting.
Here you are sitting on Native American burial ground. Martha Moorhead and Anna Moorhead used to sit below one of this big oak tree, and they'd have little picnics. This is in the 1800s. And Martha picked up enough beads from the rotting corpses from many, many hundreds of years ago to make a set of moccasins for one of the kids.
Wow. Yeah, definitely.
Lots and lots of history. Lots and lots and lots of history.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. It's very interesting.
Yes, it is.
Well, Allen, can you tell everybody again how they can get a hold of your book?
How they can get a hold of my book? They can go to, darkriverbooks.com. And that's my website. And on that website, there's a couple links to get to Amazon, where you can find the book In Too Deep. Or you can just go to Amazon and just type in, the keyword In Too Deep, and you'll find my book there.
And when are you planning on the release of
In Conflict?
In Conflict,
yes.
Well, I'm hoping hoping that it's going to at least be ready for release sometime in November. We're really close to getting it done with the editing process, which takes it. Editors are evil. they're so evil. But anyway, we're really close to getting the editing part done. And then, of course, we're going to come up with a cover. I'll work with the graphic designers to create a nice cover and then release it. And it'll as well be on Amazon. It'll be also on the website. I'm always constantly reaching out to whoever will bring me in to do seminars and talk about the dangers of paranormal investigation, as well as peddle my little book along the way. So if anybody's out there listening who would like to have me come and speak, I sure will.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, for sure. Well, it was great talking with you, Allen, and I am so glad that you agreed to be on the show. I am blown away by all the history and the knowledge of things that you've been through.
And I'm looking forward to the book, getting the book.
Yes, we will definitely be getting a hold of you directly after, so we can figure out how to get us a book to put on our shelf over here.
Well, we'll figure that one out. We can do that.
Absolutely.
I assure you, we can do that.
Absolutely.
In fact, I do here on the floor. I have a box. I have 25 copies, and I have 3 hardback copies available right now today.
Awesome. All right. Awesome. Yeah, we're gonna get you sign it for us.
Yes,
I could do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You gotta have the autograph, man.
Yes. All right. Well,
you're making me feel bigger than what I am.
Well, you know what? All you've been through. You said about Zaphis or somebody. No. You have all that. He just has the name, but you have the experience.
Yes.
All of that happened to you, and I don't think you could take anybody in there to replicate what you've been through.
Well, and just real quick, I know you want to get going here. When I was hooked up through Daniel Class through this first publisher, I told Daniel, I said, I can't write a book. And he said, don't worry, this guy's a ghostwriter. All you got to do is just sit down and tell your story, and they'll do all the work. And I thought, great, that sounds simple to me.
Yeah.
So when I called this gentleman, and I say gentleman loosely, and told him the story, I got about an hour and a half into my little story, and he stops me. He says, Allen, I can't write this book. And I just, my heart just dropped. I thought, the story sucks. It's horrible. And he says, no, he's not that. He says, there's no way. He says, me as a writer, and he's got a lot of books out there. I mean, this guy, he's got a ton of books. He's a very good author, even though who he is. But he says, Allen, there's no way that I can put the emotion into this book that you've explained it to me.
Right.
He says, I need 54,000 words. And, here I am. I went to a small podunk school called Carlisle High School or Carlisle School here in Iowa, and I would melt into the cracks of the floor. The teacher said, "I want you to write a 500-word essay." and so I literally got up in the morning and I wrote. I'd go to work. I'd come home. I'd write till I went to bed. It was just a vicious circle. And I was able to put out 54,000 words in somewhere around 3 weeks.
Wow. That's amazing.
But it was so fresh in my mind. Everything was so vivid that I was able just to pour it all out there, as well as I am the second book.
Awesome.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we definitely want to have you back on.
For sure.
I'd be more than happy to come back on. You guys are very, very nice, gracious people. I can tell you're both wonderful people.
Yeah, thank you. You're the same. I mean, and everything that you've been through, man, I'm glad that I'm not in that area.
We can't cover all that in an hour.
I know.
Plus we can get them on to talk about the dangers of paranormal.
Yes.
Because a lot of people go into this for the wrong reasons.
It's not an amusement park. Right.
Exactly.
These shows on TV, they show all the ooh and ah and sometimes the screaming starts, but it's just a show, and they got to keep it amped up just a little bit.
Yes,
to keep because viewers. They got to keep their sponsors.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I haven't got any sponsors. I'm just going to tell you what the story is.
Right.
And whether you want to believe it or not, that's fine. I don't care. In fact, I have people that tell me all the time, I don't believe in all that hooey. I'm a full-blown skeptic. And I say to them, God bless you.
Right.
Stay exactly where you're at. You are probably in the safest place that you can be in right now.
Right.
Because as I call myself Dark River. Dark River is the little group name, which I haven't even got a group, but it's Dark River. Because this thing called the paranormal, it flows everywhere. It flows wide, it flows narrow, it flows deep, it flows shallow.
Right.
And even if it's only an inch deep and you put your feet into it, you cannot see your feet because this is the blackest hole that you've ever put yourself in. There are undertows and undercurrents that'll take you away if you're not careful. And if you don't really step back and examine what you're doing. Every time something happens in your life, you got to think back, okay, I just investigated a place a week ago. Did that have something to do with what's going on with my life right now?
Right, and I've done that a million times. I've asked myself that question.
That's when you got to re-examine yourself and maybe decide, I'm not a churchgoer, but maybe, I should find myself in a pew someplace, and do a little bit of a cleansing spiritually and find your way back home, as I call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to step away from it sometimes and not let it take over your life. And
I would many times after investigating the inn, I would go into the woods and I played the Native American flute. I'm part Cherokee Indian, and I would do smudgings, but I never felt like I was really clean. I felt like I'd basically taken a bath in dirty bath water. Uh-huh. But when I came back to where I lived, to a place where I knew, and I did that little ceremony and played my flute and reconnected with God for the first time in 7 years, I actually felt liberated.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah. That's
good to know because, But I'm big on smudging myself.
See, that's why we do what we do, because I like to hear people's experiences. And that's what makes the paranormal, really. It's someone's experience. Yes. So we don't need, some of these great big... I'm not even going to say their names. These big paracelebs. Yeah,
we know who they are.
TV stars.
They've all got to make a living, though, right?
That's right. That's right. We're not going to mention them, and they can keep doing what they do. But I really love getting, down and I just really love talking to people like you, so I can get the experience. And
thank you.
I sit here with Ronnie, and we're like in awe. It's like, man, I can't believe this happened to this person. You know what I mean?
Other, like, oh my god.
So yeah, that's what's great for us. But Alan, it's been
very humbling. Thank you.
It's been fantastic,
yes, it
and
has.
I'm going to have Ronnie get a hold of you about a signed copy of your book, and we definitely are going to have you back on.
Yes.
That'd be and I'm waiting.
All right.
Whenever you're ready, I'll be here.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir, so much, and you have a wonderful evening.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning in with us tonight, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content from Paranormal Podcast is made available. If you believe you have something paranormal happening in your home or business, or you believe you may have witnessed a UFO or UAP, please send us your story, your photos, videos, questions, suggestions, and your comments to paranormallypodcast@gmail.com. You can also visit us at www.paranormallypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Hey, thanks again for watching and listening, and I hope that you tune in for next week's episode of Paranomaly. Hey, a word of caution. Paranormal Podcast and its affiliates or hosts do not verify or check the validity of any person, team, or its members. Paranormal Podcast highly advises that you proceed with caution when contacting any person or team before allowing them and having them into your home or business. A legit paranormal research and investigation team will never charge you a fee to investigate your home or business. They do, however, accept donations to help further the research and investigations if you so choose to do so. All right, thanks everybody.